do this workshop together. So like it's Nordcloud, IBM company on behalf of Microsoft presentation. So Nordcloud is a partner of Microsoft in Europe, and my name is Igor Shestitko. I am Microsoft MVP. I am senior architect cloud, senior Azure cloud architect, whatever, and I am your instructor for this and presenter for this webinar. And after that, a little bit late, Michal Buyok will join it. He will be your proctor on the labs, because we have two parts of this webinar. We have a presentation part from 9 to 12. After that, we have like a lunch break for the 1 hour, but depends on your, let's say, lifestyle. And after that, we will have the labs. By the way, labs you can do anytime. If you would like to start the labs immediately, I will share after the first presentation the links to the labs and activation code, etc., etc. You can start directly if you're not interested on the presentation, or even you can start after 12, 11, whatever time. During today, these labs will be active for the 8 hours. So after you start the lab, your account will be activated for 8 hours, and you can do the labs during these 8 hours. Today on the night it will be stopped and destroyed, so like just for today. And a few words about the Nordcloud. Nordcloud is IBM owned company that's doing a lot of consultancy and managed services in Azure. You can see Nordcloud attributes, let's say certification, specialization, etc., etc. About, you see, all about the gold. And let's start for the labs. By the way, for the presentation, by the way, so we will have 3 presentations, as I mentioned before. From 9 to 10, it will be about the introduction for the Azure migration. From 10 to 11, it will be a short introduction to the landing zone, what is landing zone and why it's important before you doing the migration. And from 11 to 12, it's exactly about the migration tools and some demo based on the labs, exactly how you can use these tools for the migration your infrastructure. And back to the introduction and overview of the migration. A lot of things, like we can discuss really long time. Do we need to migrate to the cloud or not, do not migrate to the cloud? But there is the 6 main pillars here on the market right now, why to migrate to the cloud. Main triggers, you can see this, like data center contract expiring, or if you have, or your customer have data center that's outdated, so how you can move this data center instead to upgrade this data center, etc. But anyway, to talk with your management, if you're interested on the migration, or talk with your customers, you can use these 6 pillars on this discussion. Business continuity, Azure or any other cloud, it's not only about the Azure, has really good business continuity, because no one data center can't provide you exactly the same options like provides the public cloud, because it's global, worldwide data centers and could be used a lot. So cash flow changes from capex to opex, most of interesting part for many clients. Cybersecurity threats and way how you can work with cybersecurity, it's totally changed on the cloud. And scalability, and of course the budget and resource constraints and how you can control your cost, all of this stuff, it's main cloud triggers. And again, so most interesting typically during the discussion, it's flipping from the capex to opex, that you're paying just only what you consume without the biggest capex. But frankly saying, some capex spends will be there because you need to plan migration, you need to plan transformation of your infrastructure if it's required, or even applications, etc. But anyway, it's less than plan and build a new data center, pay a lot for hardware, software upfront, and after that have the OPEX. The same way for the security, and again, so most of the interesting part, and scalability. So this is the three main pillars how the cloud can help for the organization. But a lot of questions that's okay, we understand the situation, we understand that our data center costs a lot, we understand about the capex and opex, and we decided to go for some private cloud. There is, I don't know which city you are right now, but anyway, so in this city, Stockholm, we have, for example, nice company who is owned a few data centers around Stockholm, and it's a good alternative for the Azure or any other public cloud. And here you can see on this slide, you can see the cloud provider selection criteria. And if you look on it, it's not about the price, but it's about the how you can measure different organization in common sense, like business health and processes. So what is exactly this organization is? Do they have the audit? Do they have the trust from you? What is administrative support and service level agreement, for example, even between clouds? If you don't know, for example, Azure provides the minimal SLA for the virtual machines. We are not talking about the SLA in terms of how fast they respond on the issue. We are talking about the SLA of the instances. We are talking about the SLAs of the virtual machine or any other services. So, and if we are talking about the Azure, we have 99.9% for one single virtual machine in Azure. And if you build the two machines with same service like a cluster, you will have minimum 99.95%. Or if you build this cluster on in two different availability zones, you will have 99.99%. So it means that the SLAs that's provided by the clients, by the different clouds for the clients, it could be really good point to measure the services. Again, so it's not about the SLA of the response for the support, it's about the SLA of the services at all. Plus performance, plus tools for resource monitoring and configuration management that you have for the billing and accounting, how the company provides, and also about the technical capacities and capabilities like event management, change management, like standard interfaces that you can use with the standard tools, like Azure provides standard API to connect from any application and call what it's required, right? Plus ready-to-use library for CLI, for the PowerShell, for the Python, etc., etc., and security practices. So after you look on the scenarios, how you can migrate, and trying to find right cloud provider, look on this four main criteria to better understand where you have to go. And after that, why Azure itself? Because Azure, when you migrate to the Azure, provides you a lot of, or Microsoft provides you a lot of tools where you can look on the current cost, where you can check the optimized costs, what it will be your cost during migration, what it will be your cost after the migration, etc., etc. So you will be absolutely able to estimate and be confident with the current spends and future spends in Azure. Security. Again, Azure provides maybe most effective security on the data center level, on the infrastructure level, and also for your services and application like tools that you can use. We will talk about it after. But anyway, Microsoft spends about like $1 billion per year for the security exactly in Azure, right? And scalability, again, that we discussed it, it's also a good tool for the Azure. But same time, a lot of, let's say, myths that Azure has the high price in comparison with the local private hoster. In reality, yeah, it is. When you take the virtual machine from the Azure with the, let's say, 70 euros per month, and the same configuration from the local hoster provided with the 40-50 euros per month, yeah, the price looks like higher. But again, let's back to SLA. SLA in Azure is based on the class. No, any even cloud providers do not provide the same SLA for the single instances. So Azure, 99.9% for the single virtual machine, right? For the AWS, 99.5%. So it's again quite different SLAs, because typically customers are asking about 99.9 or even 99.95. It's first one. We already discussed this, but again, Azure is worldwide solution. It means that you can build, or your customer can build the solution based on the global infrastructure and provide the services on the global worldwide level, and provide the services be confidential. That's like it's disaster recovery will be moved, especially in our nowadays, from the Europe to United States or another regions with really small delay, or even have the different instances for the different regions. It's again part of the Azure. Plus, it's not well known that Azure provides also you option for the routing. Azure has its own internet inside infrastructure. So what it means? It means that when you're doing some services for the clients, and this client, for example, your data center located in on the Europe, but your client located in United States, for example. So there is two ways. One way, standard way, so like when the client's going over the public internet to your services and connect to the data center in Europe by the public internet. Or other scenario for this worldwide solution in Azure, that you can turn on internal Microsoft routing, and it means that your service placed in Azure in data center in Europe will be published like a United States IP address in Azure. And when the customer will try to connect to your service in Europe, it will be connection with last mile to the nearest connectivity hub of Azure in United States. There is a lot of connection points around the globe. And after that, the traffic will go down to the network backbone of Azure, and will be significantly faster connect to the to your data center, to your service in Azure. All traffic will go in Azure with less hopes, with the higher performance, with less latency, etc., etc. So this is the one of the, let's say, advantage of the Azure if you're doing some, again, global solution and looking for the international customers, worldwide customers. Plus, again, high availability, reliability, etc., because you can always move your infrastructure, your services from one data center to another around the Azure. Plus, again, so roadmap for the next few years. You can talk with Microsoft, you can look on the official documents and see what will happen next, let's say 3 months, half of the year, or even 2-3 years, to better understand the strategy and better understand your requirements for the infrastructure, what you have to prepare, what will be the next, what you need to do to continue use your solution, or how you can expand this solution. Microsoft publish new services every 3 months. Yes, so the Azure 1 years ago and right now, it's absolutely two different Azure solutions that you have in place. A lot of changes inside each services happens every 3 months. Not each, but let's say 1 or 2 services at least change it every 3 months. A lot of certification, all certifications that you can imagine, Azure has. Try to ask for the some hoster. Before I work for the some global, let's say, or regional hoster, and I know how it's hard to get the every certification, especially ISO certification for the local hosters. And again, so if you care about the ISO certification, you will get it. Plus, you will get a lot of tools that will help you to be compliant with absolutely different standards, governance regulations, etc., like GDPR in Europe. Azure provides you a lot of tools that allow you to work with these regulations and better understand and even check to have the baselines on your infrastructure. Plus, reliability based on the data centers in one region. So you always can put your workload split it between 1, 2, 3 different data center in one region, like availability zones. You always can share, or you can replicate your workloads, your data between different regions. You have the paired regions like West Europe and North Europe, and if you don't know, data automatically could be replicated, like backups, like a disk, etc., could be automatically replicated between these regions that allow you to have higher availability for your services. Security, we will talk about later. A lot of rich management and monitoring tools again, so we will talk about monitoring tool after that, but anyway, just to understand that Azure provides you 3 different levels for the monitoring tools. One, you can monitor what's going on the data center levels at all, so you can know what will happen with the data center in Azure, what is maintenance time, which services crashed or will be crashed or overloaded, etc., and you can react on this level, moving your workloads between data centers. You can look on the resource level. Resource level means, for example, virtual machine, and you can look to the health of the virtual machines, what's going on in terms of Azure, like hypervisor, to work with this virtual machine, like is it running or not running. So physically virtual machine is turned on, but it's crashed blue screen, or it's degraded because Azure lost some network connectivity for this rack where this virtual machine placed it, or Azure rack physical machines, right? So have the issue with performance. So all of this stuff, it's exactly about the monitoring and a lot of tools to manage it, etc. Plus monitoring, of course, of what's going on inside service itself, right? What's going on with virtual machine, what's going on with web application, etc., etc. Plus log analytics tools that allow you to easily collect the data and analyze the data with the standard queries to build alerts, etc., etc. Compatibility, so Azure, even from the beginning, so Azure right now has 14 years old, but Microsoft still work with the classic, let's say, solutions, or support the classic solution, plus support the non-supported operation system like Windows 2008 R2 in Azure 2, and support itself. So yeah, we can talk a lot about the support, Microsoft support, global support, etc., etc. But trust me, it's one of the best support over the world, really. So like 24/7 with fast problem resolution, and Microsoft is trying to do this best year by year again. So I work a lot with the Microsoft support, for example, from 2018 until 2021, and in these 3 years support was changed significantly in Microsoft. It's more professional, it's more faster, it's more predictable, let's say, and in 99.9% you always have your problem resolution in one day. So it's why, again, when you compare the prices between Azure and some hosters or even some public clouds, why some Azure more expensive. But in some cases, we will talk about Azure even more cheaper. And to better understand what is your prices, what is your, again, estimation, what you can use. You can use Azure Tco Calculator. It's a tool that allows you to do some estimation, etc., etc. Let's do Azure Tco Calculator. Hope it will work. So what you can do, you can build your workloads, you can build your databases, you can build your storages, networking, etc., etc. Let's do this like a virtual machines, how many VMs we are hosting. Let's say 33, Hyper-V, 4 cores, 32 gigs of RAM, optimized by memory. Let's say this one, it will be for 30, let's say we have 4 VMs, Hyper-V, 8 cores, 128 gigs of RAM, optimized by memory again. Destination, we will move it to the database, the core. Okay, looks like good. And let's do some storage. We have storage, we have capacity of 4 terabytes, backup 4 terabytes, and archive 4 terabytes, and networking we are working about 5 terabyte per. And here, if you look on it, you can look a lot of parameters like GI redundant storage to protect your data. You can check your electricity cost. By the way, I don't know why it's here, because here in Slovakia we have right now about 20 cents, euro cents per kilowatt, but whatever. By the way, you can change from United dollars to Eurozone. Let's see. Now it's just changed by the exchange rate, not by the real rate or real price. But anyway, after that, you can see your by the way, when you choose the Sweden or Norway, it's disappeared. I don't know why. It's some bug. I already reported about this tool, but anyway, let's use the West Europe, and you can see that your West Europe, you can see the total cost for this infrastructure on premise, total cost of this infrastructure in Azure, and the difference you can compare, you can calculate this, you can try to better tune based on your parameters, whatever. But in reality, this is one of the tools that help you to understand. Plus, you can use a lot of tools like Azure Pricing Calculator. You can use the Azure Pricing Calculator here and calculate your machines, and most important again part that you have to understand the difference between the prices. Let's take a huge one. Let's take M series, for example, SV2, like this one, why not? So this is standard SAP deployment for the enterprise, and you need for the HANA at least 2 machines like this. And you can see the price, but you have to understand that here you can cut your prices 60%, even 72% it says, right? So paying monthly this price, plus you can use your Azure hybrid benefits during the calculation. And same for the disks. When you add additional disk, you can pay reserve and pay less for these scenarios. Anyway, for the calculation during migration, you can build your cost, etc. You can also join to the Azure Migrate program. The Azure Migrate program is program from the Microsoft team. It's online program, so like you can easily join by from the Microsoft page. I will share the links after to discuss with Microsoft to look on the cost optimization, etc. So based on the TCO, based on this calculator, you can easily get your costs during the migration, and after that, from post-migration part, you can easily work with Azure Advisor, the tools that allow you to check what's going on in your infrastructure in terms of performance, cost, etc., etc., and you will receive recommendation from the advisor, and you can use the policy to lock some or block deployment some bigger machines like this. Typical, let's say, human mistake, human error, that's like build bigger than needed, and the advisor will check, is it underperformant machine or what's going on? Maybe it will be better to stop this machine during non-working hours, because monitoring says that no any activity there, etc., etc. Plus again, you can use the Azure cost management tool to understand what's going on. Plus, as I mentioned before, Microsoft is really cheaper when you move workloads like Windows machines, because you can use your Azure benefits. Plus, when you use your SQL servers on Windows and Azure and virtual machines with SQL servers, optimize it to work with Azure. And in this case, if you look on the performance with the same configuration between AWS and Azure, TPS will be 4 times mostly higher, but the price based on again reservation to the TPS, if you do the correlation, it will be 84% less, so cheaper per transaction. This is the way how Microsoft could be more effective, especially if you're doing the lift and shift migration. And by the way, the lift and shift migration will be one of the part of our scenarios. Plus, again, during these labs today, we will do exactly the assessment analysis, what is the required resources, how we can migrate, etc., all of this stuff, and you will be better understand scenario how you can analyze possible costs. Plus, you don't need to, let's say, go and say that okay, we can compare Apple with Apple, but in reality, in each virtual cloud provider, you need to understand that instead of only the virtual machine, there is a lot of, let's say, granularity to better tune the prices, to better understand the prices. For example, if you're going with virtual machine or application services or database like a PaaS service, right, then put the directly to the virtual machine. You can easily tune and understand how the data will go in and what will going on inside. Plus, when we are looking about the data storage cost, there is a lot of changes inside storages and data, etc. Look, for example, we are looking for the disk, like let's say 1 terabyte disk we need for the virtual machine. It will be one disk, it will be premium SSD with local or zone redundancy. Why we can't do this? Because it does not support here. Let's take the West Europe. Let's take the Eurozone. Okay, is it? Yeah. So you see zone redundancy, local redundancy. What you need to have for this database. If you want to switch for the cheaper size, you need to understand that this size will have some different additional costs, you see, because you have to pay on transaction and you need to understand how many transactions will happen. If we are talking about the million operations, you see the price will go in upper, and you need to understand this stuff too. Even for the standard HDD or standard SSD, you can cut the prices, yes, but it depends on the transaction. So if we have 1000 IOPS, it means in each second we can produce 1000 operation. 10 seconds will produce you additional cost like this one. So back to the 1 hour you will produce like this one cost. And if we multiply 24 and multiply by 30, this cost will be applied with 1000 IOPS. You see the difference, right? So this is mostly 500 euros, let's say 550 euros, the price when you try to cut the prices with standard HDD, but SSD, sorry. But when you are looking for the premium SSD with the same size, the price, the price will be just 140. And look, so there is a lot of options. There is a lot of parameters. There is a lot of how you define, etc., etc. And it is why you need to have someone who can help you to better understand. Because again, this granularity could affect, let's say, so like for example, in my personal projects, I am mostly working with SAP deployment, SAP migration, etc., to build infrastructure, SAP on Azure, help to deploy it, etc., etc. Just easiest way with this granularity to work with backups, to work with monitoring, etc. From the standard price, for example, for last project, we have about 85,000 euros per month for the SAP infrastructure. Just with the tuning, the backup costs, data storage cost, what also the networking costs, changing the types and parameters for the disk, etc. It was cut by 18,000 from 85,000 to 65,000, mostly 67,000, mostly. So like this is by the cutting the price, by the changing the model of the reservation, by the looking what we can do with the hybrid, etc., etc. So this is the way how you can easily look on the prices, better understand the prices, and go deeper and deeper. And let's back to the Azure tools like security, right? As I mentioned before, Microsoft invests about 1 billion annually for the Azure Security. What it means? It means that Microsoft invests on the protection of the infrastructure, of the monitoring of the infrastructure, of the developing new tools that will be provided for the customer. You can see the trillion signals, what's going on after that with this trillion signals. Each signal from each infrastructure that's placed on the Azure coming to the AI that analyze this situation and trying to compare with another signal with another infrastructure to better understand the templates, etc., etc. And it's easiest way to find the attacks, to understand what's going on, etc. And on top of it, you can use a lot of different services, some services for free, some services paid services, etc. But anyway, so if you're looking for the security management, you can use Azure Sentinel, you can use Azure Security Center to better understand what's going on with infrastructure itself. Look on it, change the parameters, use the Azure policy to tuning, use the Azure policy and baselines to understand the situation. Threat protection, and again, it's Azure Sentinel, it's Azure Security Center to analyze what's going on with the infrastructure itself, the signals, analysis, templates, processes, logs, etc., etc. And again, it works not only with the Azure, but you can also connect your on-premise services, your on-premise machines, client machines, to Sentinel, to Azure Security Center to analyze their security and to analyze their health baselines, etc., and what's going on inside the machines too. Identity and access management. It's Azure Active Directory. You can work with the hybrid mode between Azure Active Directory and on-premise Active Directory. You can do a lot of things like multi-factor authentication, conditional access, identity protection. It means that in Azure there is a lot of internal tools that analyze each, for example, customer login, is it standard, not standard? Is it from the common location or non-common location? Like if I try to log in Azure here from Bratislava, right, and after that same time with, for example, virtual desktop try to log in from Dubai, it will be like a non-possible travel, like, right? So like, and Azure will analyze this and provide this information. Same for the devices. When I'm doing the login from the standard devices, and after that from somewhere, from non-standard devices I'm never use, it also will be the flags, etc. Conditional access, is it our machine, not our machine? Is it controlled machine, not controlled? Check it, not check it. With baseline, no baseline. All of this about the Active Directory plus PMIM, right? Privilege Identity Management, when you can escalate your privileges only for the required time and only with the, for example, approval, manual approval from the some team who is security officer or security management team. It's all about the identity. Application and data security, a lot of encryption options and a lot of way how you can store your keys inside Azure Key Vault, or you can use your own keys, bring your own keys, use your HSM infrastructure in Azure too, with the Azure Key Vault Premiums edition, etc. And networks, a lot of tools for the networking protection, Azure Firewall, DDoS protection, application gateway with web application firewall, etc., etc. You can use it, you can predict it, you can calculate it, like again I mentioned before, if we are talking about Azure Security Center, it's renamed Azure Defender. No? How's the...
I think it's just Defender for Cloud.
Yeah, but just Defender. Okay. Just let's say Defender. Yeah, Microsoft Defender for Cloud for now. So like, what we are planning to protect, right? So servers plan 100 servers. This is our price. What we are planning to protect in terms of storages per transaction, again, so like you have to pay agentless monitors, etc., etc. This is scenario. Firewall. Again, you have to understand the granularity of the firewall, because it's a question about what you need to... Wait. Where's the search bar? It will be premium to support a lot of options, and it will be at least 3 logical units that will work together, and it will be our 10 terabytes of the data. This is the price. But again, it's predictable, understandable tools that could be used like a PaaS or IaaS or SaaS, whatever, easily to calculate and easily to understand during the pricing. And another thing that you can use, it's Azure Hybrid Mode. Azure Arc, it's a tool that allow you to bring object, not exactly the tool, but object to the Azure. What it mean, object? For example, you have on-premise solution, you have Azure Stack, you have any other cloud, etc. You just install the required agents on the machines, on the operation system, on the Kubernetes clusters, on the databases, etc. and you can see this object, you can see the logs, you can see the parameters of this object on the real environment, right? And do the assessment, do the performance check, do the security baseline checks, etc., etc. So that's why it's important about the hybrid, that you need to understand that migration to the Azure, it's not about one shot and cut over after that. You can do it one by one, and even you can keep using some on-premise solution, I don't know, because the regulation, government regulation, company regulation, because it's outdated solution, etc., and you are planning to do some re-engineering, rebuilding this solution directly in Azure, but do not want to move current version, etc. Anyway, it's a way how you can control and look on your environment by the Azure Hybrid with the Azure Arc. Plus you can bring even the part of the Azure, like Azure Stack, to your data center. What mean Azure Stack? I don't know, are you familiar or not? It's a software and hardware solution. Hardware you can buy from the Microsoft partners like Dell or like Lenovo. It's a set of certified hardware, servers, data storages, etc., etc. After that, you download and install on this hardware engine of Azure Core, and you will have exactly the same, mostly the same, let's say. It's named Azure Stamp. Azure Stamp, it's like a logical unit inside the Azure. You will have this Azure Stamp on your data center with the high availability, disaster recovery options, etc., the same like in Azure. It means that you will be able to host virtual machines and move virtual machines between Azure and your Stack physical machines. You can monitor and control both of the solution from the one. You will see this like your data center, additional data center and additional option to placement. So like from the portal or from the command prompt, you will have whatever you name it, like a Stockholm blah 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 data center. All right, so it will be your Azure Stack, and you can control virtual machines, you can control Kubernetes, you can control application services, you can control database services exactly inside your data center. About the high availability, we already discussed it, but anyway, you have to understand that Microsoft provides best in class right now in industry availability and SLA for availability 99.9% for the one virtual machine, 99.95% for the two machines in one data center, 99.9%, and if you share it between data centers, availability zones, you will have 99.99% for the virtual machines, for example. Plus a lot of tools that allow you to work with the high availability and disaster recovery. It's Azure Backup in Azure itself, Azure Backup for on-premise machines, so you can use the same scenario for the virtual machine in Azure and same time backup your on-premise machines also to the Azure. Plus again, this backup can be replicated between primary region and parent region, so it means that if you place the backup, let's do this backup, Azure Backup. Let's take West Europe. How many machines? 100 machines. Each machine will have 50 gigs to backup. And if you look here, like let's do this like a standard way. Retention, and look here, we can play with the local backups with one price, or replicate it between different regions and it will be another price 2 times, or even you can use the second backup like read available, so it means that this backup could be restored and use it for regression, etc., etc. It's, by the way, really cool stuff that's typically used by some organization when you need regression test. You just take the backup from the secondary region that's available and build the infrastructure on the secondary region and do the test. Plus, you see, there is a lot of stuff where you can play with the different parts of the size of the data, etc. But anyway, it's also the tool to work with. Plus Azure Site Recovery that allow you to replicate between on-premise and Azure infrastructure in real time with the lowest minimal RPO, RTO between 2 Azure region, or even between 2 Azure data centers, availability zones. You can replicate from Azure to on-premise, etc. So like it's all about the Azure Site Recovery. And again, these tools also predictable, understandable, and how we are going with, for example, we are planning to replicate machines, customer owned instances 0, and here will be the, so this is the exactly the price, I'm sorry, exactly the price for the machines that will be replicated, plus cost of the storage that will be used for the secondary region. But anyway, you can easily go with it, control, etc. Plus a lot of back to the monitoring, for example, really easy to reproduce scripts that check the real-time RPO, RTO during, for example, the Azure Site Recovery to better understand what's going on in your infrastructure and which RPO you have right now exactly in case of some failure, etc. And workloads. So like in Azure, you can use any workloads with a lot of things that's optimized by CPU, by memory, for the confidential computer, for the compute intensive, etc. with the different types of the disk. We already played with it with the standard HDD, standard SSD. You're paying with its artifacts from the previous Azure, by the way, and you have to pay for the transaction. For the premium SSD or ultra disk, you don't need to pay for the transaction, and you're just paying for the for the size. And again, so like there's a lot of additional stuff that's built inside the Azure. For example, VMware. So VMware on Azure, it's a tool that allow you to replicate and continue to use the VMware infrastructure on top of Azure infrastructure. You will have your vSphere, you will have your hosts, etc., etc., but this host exactly will be machines in Azure. SAP, yeah, so like you can build SAP on Azure. It will be based on virtual machine or on physical machines. It's also possible. Plus Microsoft provides a lot of tools to deploy SAP. Right now, for me to deploy SAP on Azure, it's required just a few hours because SAP automation deployment framework from Microsoft allow you to have a lot of configuration scripts, just like, or configuration files for the scripts, let's say, that will build from scratch, from nothing, to ready to use SAP with installed SAP in a few hours. Just most of the time it will take to download SAP binaries to install it. But if you have the configuration files, after that it's nothing. Cray, I don't know, do you need Cray? But no one never sees this, someone who asks to deploy the Cray infrastructure and NetApp infrastructure, like a service that's ready to use, easy to manage, etc. Really often use it with the SAP or with VMware to have the infrastructure the same like NetApp, with performance and even higher performance, with replicas between regions, etc., etc. Based on the different open source and Linux solution, you can see here also no issue to move with this. But just again, back to my experience, if we are going with virtual machine and we are planning to build SAP, just for you to know, this one. And if you look here, for example, again, we are building the SAP solution, and we take something on the middle, like it will be 2 machines. You see, so the price for the machine, we can say that we are ready to pay monthly, 3 years reserved, nice price here. And if we took here, nice price here, but you can see this one, and the price will be charged upfront, so you can't pay, unfortunately. I don't know why. You can't pay because it's using Linux licenses. You can't pay monthly this really, let's say, understandable sum, but you have to pay upfront. So like when you're doing this, even with the stuff, check the prices, check the situation. You see here, SQL Enterprise, this is the price. Or here, this is the price, but upfront. So just like to know that sometimes you can think that it's for free, but in reality it's not for free, because you need to pay for the licenses for the special Linux solution, plus some payment for the licenses could not be done in reserved mode per month, but can be done only in case of reserved, only upfront. So this is the scenario. But anyway, all tools like Red Hat, SUSE, Ubuntu, CentOS, etc. fully supported by vendor and by Microsoft, plus a lot of things like a tuned kernel, JBoss integration or SAP integration, plus all tools for the database like Postgres, like MySQL, etc. provided not only like a IaaS solution, but also like PaaS solution, so you can easily build the solution what you need. For AWS, AVD, for AVD you have a lot of options to build. By the way, we have separate immersion workshop for the Azure Virtual Desktops. It's rename it right now, Azure Virtual Desktops, where you can move your infrastructure. And again, right now it's PaaS service, not IaaS service. It's use IaaS on top of it, and you can easily build your solution. Plus application services, a lot of things that you can move. .NET web application with load balancing, with auto scaling, with management tools, etc. Scenarios for the SQL Server, as I mentioned before, we can go with IaaS with SQL Server inside the virtual machine. We can go with SQL Server like a managed instance or like database. So the difference between this, and this, that's you are managed virtual machine itself, you are managed the SQL Server itself, you have full access to virtual machine and SQL Server. With managed instance, you manage exactly the SQL Server. You can see all databases, you can install your DLLs, etc. But you are not managing the part of the virtual machine that's placed where it's placed. Plus, you can't manage high availability, always on clustering options, etc. So if you want to build the cluster with always on here, you have to build it manually. For this one, you just change the type of the managed instance from the general purpose to the premium or business, and Microsoft will build the always on hidden instance. And it means that this service will be automatically switched, etc., with no interaction from your side. And SQL database is just database on one of this cluster, let's say. Microsoft will build all for you, and you just manage your database access and data. And by the way, when asked that, like, what is the difference for the price will not be quite different from here to here, but you need to understand that here you spend less on the monitoring, on the maintenance, etc. Plus, it's easily to tune because you can use, for example, SQL database on the DTA mode when you select exactly the performance. That's all, right? So, like you say, it's like, let's say I need 100, let's say IOPS. It's not really IOPS, but let's say 100 operations. DTU, that's described, these units described in Microsoft documentation. It's a set of operations, how many operations like DTUs can be executed in parallel in one database with the result in 1 second. So this is exactly the DTU, and you can set the DTU directly to tune your performance and do not care about the, let's say, tuning of these virtual machines and SQL, or tuning these instances, etc. All will be tuned automatically by to provide the required DTU here on the database. It's different, and why we need to use. And again, so back to the migration, common migration projects. It's migration of the virtual server, Windows servers or Linux servers, like virtual machines, SQL server like a virtual machine or database, etc. And these 3 options we will look today on the labs. So you're welcome to the labs again. Also, you can move dev test environment. Also, you can move the application. For the application migration, again, it's a different immersion workshop. How to build it, how to migrate it, etc. We can easily migrate SAP, especially because we have SAP automation framework, deployment framework. You can migrate VMware, NetApp, Oracle, or VDI. VDI is out of scope again. AVD for now. It's separate workshop here. But before moving to the Azure, again, do not forget that's like there is a lot of steps that you need to cover before. You need to do the assessment. We will look how to do the assessment, etc. You need to understand skills, experience, and how you will work after that with managed services. So it's change management, which application you are trying to retire, rehost, convert. There is a funnel of the migration process. You can see what we have to retire, about 30% typically. I mean instances, not services, but instances like unneeded domain controllers I needed, file shares, etc., can be just retired. Some servers like Exchange, SharePoint, etc., could be moved to the SharePoint online, to the Office 365, whatever, Power BI, you see. And after that, we are doing the technical assessment and recosting with Azure Migrate. We are building the landing zone. We will talk about the landing zone next presentation. And after that, we are building the hybrid identity authentication and do exactly the migration process to migrate this solution. And some scenarios, application layer and data layer, like as is, lift and shift, from the virtual machine to the virtual machine in Azure, from the virtual machine to data base level, like a data level, like a service, and web layer, like a, again, web layer, VDI solution from the different virtual desktops options. It's also possible to migrate to different virtual desktops option. Microsoft provide Azure Virtual Desktops, or you can use the Citrix on top of it. But anyway, after that, all infrastructure will be Azure EAS. So, like when you build Azure Virtual Desktops, you just build, let's say, RDS infrastructure like gateways, brokers, etc., etc. But all hosts, it will be the virtual machines. And by the way, Azure provides the virtual machines not only for the virtual Windows servers, but it could be also Windows 10, Windows 11 with pre-installed Office in multiple, so like not one machine but one user, but in multi-user proposal. It's also the feature of Azure Virtual Desktop for now. And different scenario for migration, as I mentioned, Azure Application Service, Azure SQL, and how to go. Again, Microsoft provides you some tools like a Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. We will talk about the Cloud Adoption Framework on next presentation. Azure Migration Project and Fast Track for Azure. So it's programs from Microsoft where you can find the help and recommendation about the migration. Fast Track, it's more technical program that's including Microsoft engineers and partners like NordCloud to migrate, and Azure Migrate like a tool. We'll look on Azure Migrate closely with the labs and with the third presentation today. And how to migrate, again, so it's Cloud Adoption Framework. We will talk because we are quite running out of time. We'll talk about on next presentation. Azure Migration Program, Azure, you can sign in for free. You can look the documentation, you can contact, ask the question, look the templates, etc. And Azure Migrate, the tool that's exactly help us to migrate with the different scenarios. Plus, to understand, are you ready to migrate? Most of the common tools are better to understand. KMS, Smart Tool. Ta-da! If you go with, and there is quite a lot of common questions, like has you identified business reasons why you are moving to the cloud? No. Limited. Of course, you can always ask NordCloud. No. Why I'm answering no? Just a second, you will understand better. It's not a lot of questions. No landing zone, no migration, nothing. Nothing. Okay, yes. Ah, sorry. No, 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 no. Ta-dam! And why it's no, I put the no to demonstrate you that there is a recommendation for each step. If you don't know how to start with the business strategy and understand your business strategy, you can go here and look again most of the typical triggers, most of the typical pillars for the migration, and better understand how to provide this information for the management or for your customers, etc. All of these documents, there is a lot of templates, etc. It's all about the cloud adoption framework. We will talk on the next presentation about it. And again, next step, it's look for the migration, look for the migration program, Azure Migration Pro, to the fast track, use the smart tool, and go for the migration. Questions? It looks like you can ask the questions on the chat. Presentation, it was a question that's, yeah, presentation will be shared, by the way. Thank you to remind me about that. And here you can use these two links. So like one, it's a list of the presentation, etc., etc. You can go here, register here, and contact with our manager who is working with immersion workshops, exactly, Microsoft manager, and he will share with you the links. This is the links how you can get it, or you can contact directly with me. I don't know, can you see my email from the Teams? Just a second. This one I will put on the chat. Okay, if there's no questions, let's back in 7 minutes because we quite run out of time. Let's back next session 10:20 and continue with the second part. It's about the landing zone, cloud adoption framework, etc. And thank you for joining. See you later.